Hey, everybody. Welcome to our podcast at Talk Lab. I'm going to be talking to Lauren Allen, who is going to tell us what's too hot to handle and what's too cold to hold. You said, and what kind of got me to see kind of why it was interesting to talk with you in the first place. I didn't understand the background, but art history. Like, how'd you get from art history to a marketing career?
I have always been interested in art. My mom was an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than coloring books, we had reams of paper, all different mediums to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were immersed in that creative world from the jump. And I pretty much was assured that life as a fine artist would be feast or famine at best.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into graphic design, and then part of our program folded. And I just followed a track with a professor that I really loved in art history and got involved in Southeast Asian studies as the concentration for art history, and wanted to continue on and go get a PhD. And then I think I just had this reality because I'd always been working in sales and didn't realize it. For my parents' company, just in engaging in relationships, getting what I wanted from my mom or dad around a sales technique that I think my sister and I had mastered. So it married. When I decided I didn't want to teach college students, because I was a college student and I wasn't necessarily that fond of like seeing how many people were falling asleep in classes.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to argue philosophies for the rest of my life, and decided I'm just going to go into sales, had an opportunity to work in advertising. So that was the intersection of me finding that creative niche, with marketing and sales, being able to talk to people like we talk. It just seemed like a natural fit. And I think I had been doing it all along.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it.
It almost seems like it's planned, right? I mean, you'd think that you'd want that art history texture
But I loved
marketing.
it, and I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah.
History of all kind, but, specifically art history, not that you would necessarily see as much of a domestic sort of impact like we do here with, American artists, but, any art that's created is performing either a function or sending a message.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why I really loved art history for sure. So.
Yeah. So the years of marketing, like where did you start?
I worked for the Sun-Times News Group in advertising, selling advertising sales, and became an accidental graphic designer for them on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really kind of back when marketing was more traditional marketing, direct mail, not even really utilizing the internet back then for any sort of true target marketing. It was husband and wife were definitely marketing and sales. So that was a blended unity. But marketing in general, I think, as a specific sort of focus, would have definitely been when I had a job at the Philadelphia Weekly. And, we were planning campaigns around different events we were hosting. Mm-hmm. And I understood that when you were hanging out and socializing and networking, that you were essentially becoming a part of another company's interests in solving their challenges. So that was in 2001.
So it was the connection. I think that, and it's interesting, that is also a big connection for me. It's kind of when you understand somebody's problem and you have this, and it's like, it's not, problem may be an overstatement. It's like you really want to help them.
Yeah.
You know that you can help them.
Yeah. And it starts organically with did you ever think about this? Had you ever thought about that? And, those are the best case scenarios because, sometimes you don't even have to go through a diagnosis to understand what the challenge is, because there's multitudes of them at any specific time. But that's the fun about marketing, I think, is you are consistently failing until you solve. Mm-hmm. And you eventually get to that. And that's also, another thing with marketing. I believe it's a long game. It's persistence. And so solving problems for people is one of those feel-good things too. It's not just, monetarily driven.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how you grow relationships. If you prove you can solve someone's problem, maybe someone else is experiencing that same problem.
That's right.
Might not require the same solution, but you at least know how to diagnose some of the symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And the trust that's passed on in a referral like that, you get quickly to
Absolutely.
it's very hard when you don't have you haven't built any rapport with somebody.
Yes.
They're not going to let you look inside.
Hence the long game.
Yeah.
Long sales cycles. If you don't have anyone that can speak to the fact that you genuinely cared about understanding, their pain points.
Mm-hmm. So in some ways, like, it is a super intimate, I think it's a very intimate process, like, to help somebody to really carry the weight that they have in a way that isn't like, it's very unique too. So if they could have fixed it before, it would have been easy to fix, but it's kind of finding that thing that not only yourself as a marketer, but your team, you've got other skill sets on your team, but how has the experience been for you going from, say, like working directly with a founder or an entrepreneur versus, say, a corporate in a larger corporate brand?
Both have their specific sort of DNAs. I prefer, and it's no slight to any sort of larger corporations, I think you have that certain level of intimacy and a fostered trust when you're working directly with a founder. I personally like investing my time in that sort of manic, building an Airbus mid-flight feeling that you get with a startup, because there's a lot of chaos, but you can really see clearly because you really have to prove yourself. And that you've got a product or a service that, will benefit your audience completely. But I like that it's an all hands on deck feeling. There's a little bit more of a direct line of open communication where the decision maker lies. Conversely, when you are in a situation where it's more a larger corporate and there's, ostensibly a global company, you have your families within that corporation, but, the level of impact that you can drive is not as significant. So I think I kind of like to envision myself as like a lone wolf sort of, mentality to succeed, but a pack animal at heart. And I think you get that real pack animal feeling when you're building something together. And that's where I believe, because I'm interested in that, I think that's where I'm most effective in marketing, because I wear a lot of different hats and I like to. Like, I'm a border collie. I like lots of brightly colored Frisbees zinging at me at all times. And then wrapping all that up with the other teams and, having those sometimes heavier conversations, like of where we need to tune our own sort of skill sets up or where we need to put more of our energy and not get so, narrowly focused on one type of task. That's where I find the sweet spot of, marketing, design, creativity, storytelling.
So you have been is it more on the sales side of the marketing equation in the last, tell me about your...
More creative and sales, so business development and marketing.
Okay.
But, given my druthers, I would rather not sit behind a stack of numbers and, go through analytics. Yes, I can, and yes, I do. Critical in any marketing function. But there's also a lot of tools out there that help you understand that. But I do really lean toward the creative process. So being involved in creative direction, if not creating assets for a company, establishing brands, really giving that brand a voice, and making sure that when I'm working with these, companies, that the brand voice is authentic and relatable to the people, because those are the people whose challenges you're trying to solve. So it requires listening and, so I would say it's definitely marketing, because building websites, understanding your target audience and building out those personas are equally as important. But I believe in a golden thread weaving through the tapestry and that storytelling and being authentic about it.
So we've talked about this before, but like this idea of a full stack marketer. So what in your estimation is someone who can bring even a sort of a candle to that concept?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple different schools of thought, because these days people say that generalist is king, and I don't disagree with that.
Right.
However, if you're in a larger corporation, your specialized skills will find probably a more hospitable home. The generalist works well because they are educated and experienced in a lot of different areas that are critical to a successful marketing function. Business development as well. But I would say that when someone speaks to the fact, and this is just my opinion, when someone speaks to the fact that they are a full stack marketer or a full stack developer, let's say in IT,
Either.
The perils you might face are stating out loud and on the record that you can excel in all of these areas. And because marketing is with, the internet, social media, the digital age, AI, because it's so massive, it'd be like a physician saying, I'm really sorry that you're having these migraines. Let's give you, an MRI, CT scan, and then we're going to have our, full stack thoracic surgeon perform brain surgery on you. Like, it's not a great analogy, but you see what
It's pretty good.
You're picking up what I'm putting down?
Yeah, I got it.
There's peril in declaring yourself a jack of all trades. You should have a certain centralized focus on what it is you really feel that you're passionate about, and B, can prove that you know how to move the needle with those skill sets.
Right.
So yes, a generalist is good, a specialist is good, but I think it's just kind of word salad when people decide to declare themselves a full stack anything.
Right. So who do you think, what brands or individuals are just killing it? That is it old school, new school? Who's doing it today? And where or what directions are people really, really getting it right?
There's a lot of great brands. I'm an audiophile, so I listen to a lot of music. I read a lot about it. And I think that as much as I'll get clobbered for saying this, I feel like the Zoomers, Gen Z, and millennials have a real firm grasp on branding, self-branding, because it's not ostentatious. They don't typically tend to overdo it. They're aware that the attention span is, just minuscule. So I would say, as far as brands, typically your big brands that seem to do it right are obviously Nike and Adidas, because they're dialing into the hero sort of ethos, and elevating their brand even further. But, if you move downstream to smaller, mid-size, I really don't feel comfortable speaking of smaller brands, but to speak of music, I would say DFA Records, James Murphy's label. He sings for LCD Sound System.
Okay.
There's something very simple, the simple aesthetic and the product behind it. Like, I just think that their marketing is so small and almost so quiet, but the presence of their music is so large. I don't know, he's around my age, so he's not, a Zoomer or anything, but I just really like the look and the feel of like a hometown brand. Yeah,
I think everybody resonates. I had a friend recently had written a book basically on that artisan crafting, and because it was a little bit, it's a little passe now, but the kind of concept too that hit me recently, and the question is there's a lot of great systems people out there, like when designers used to lead agencies, like people that are just intellectually, top notch. And then they can build a small system, and seeing them going out and building, like, say, a thought leadership platform using podcasting or newsletters to offer a really refined space. I saw one recently, it was really quiet, but it's brilliant, versus, say, somebody that maybe is in the same industry, but is a visual savant, somebody that's like really, really good. And one has to be, it's hard to be quiet or loud, or vice versa. It's just, do you see that like playing out any?
Do you mean personality wise when you say volume, or do you mean like physically they are quiet?
Well, the brand is quiet. The marketing's quiet because it's so potent. It's almost like its potency is its strength versus.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because if we go back to the whole thing about attention span, I definitely believe that if you have a quieter impact and a compelling visual, and you're more curious, why aren't they being louder? Why isn't it in my face? Like, they have a really great product line. I really like their their cultural identity. Why are they so quiet? It makes you more curious. So,
Right.
I don't think there's any wrong way to do branding except for the wrong way to do branding. If that makes any sense.
And there is something there's something really triggering about when it gets through your sort of your survival filter that you discovered it, that it's you, that it's, and that happens a lot, I think it happens more now than ever because there's just so many offerings. But when you feel like, hey,
brands can become intimate. They sometimes live with you every day. You sometimes think about them every day, or at least use a product of that brand that you like every day. It's fascinating. And the psychology behind branding is also equally as compelling.
Yeah. And too, like, they do become sort of part of your conscience. A lot of personalities do, especially as we're listening to them, we're hearing them, we know their way they think. There's just a tremendous amount of knowledge that's out there right now. So why has education, or something that when you think about, like, why does education matter? Why is that something for you that's been something
it's everything.
Yeah,
it's everything. I think that, when you step back and you look at just how the world works, that people that aren't afforded or don't have access to a good education are already kind of behind the 8 ball. It's something that, it divides and separates. I feel very lucky. I come from a blue collar background. My mom and dad were both, very passionate about making sure we had a good education, little sidebar that I'm sure she wouldn't be happy I'm talking about, but we had 2 Folgers coffee cans by the toilet that had Trivial Pursuit cards in them. The ones we read, because we would complain that we were bored. So we would read them in the loo, and we would read those facts. And when we were done, we would put them in the other can. Then we'd get quizzed. And so little things like that around the house all the time. But when you read and you absorb and you learn, you're taking in the whole world. And I think that there's also practical applications, of being with students and learning from them when you're younger. Behavioral sort of systems, et cetera. It's just integral to how we develop. And so I think education is absolutely paramount to how we digest the world, how we behave in it, how we adapt and contort with it.
Yeah, and now more than ever, right? And so the question with that and AI, and you're thinking about younger people, like, if it's about writing a prompt and you have to draw on, essentially a question to get a result, how do you think that sets us up for what kind of world do you think we're headed to? And
you're asking the wrong person. I hear what you're saying.
Maybe as far as, like, even just what keeps you up at night about the world we're going to live in as it relates
Laziness.
to maybe,
laziness,
okay.
Entitlement. I think that every year you age and you hopefully get smarter, that you're taking lessons along with you. And I think that AI will inevitably be a great tool. It already is, but I believe that there needs to be a foundational education and an ability to speak and articulate your own thoughts to a certain degree. I'm a bit more extroverted. I think you are too. But for people who are more introverted, it's very difficult to, you'll have the thoughts. It's actually speaking them out loud or making that articulation in the way that you see fit that is difficult. But I believe that, I worry that we'll be using AI too much as a crutch to solve problems when it's really kind of up to you to figure out and go through experiences that lead you to an answer. So scripting, that's one thing.
Right.
But I think you really need to use the non-artificial intelligence in your brain to solve certain problems, and use AI, whether it's ChatGPT, et cetera, to help tackle the more mundane tasks. And you can learn from that as well. But it's moving fast. And I just think we need to be focused on that as a potential tool in our tool shed, as opposed to the solution in our tool shed.
Right. So what do you love? Like what's your greatest curiosity right now that you want to develop more and more and more? it could be a combination of things, but where are you headed?
I think about food all the time. I think about food. I'm thinking about it now. I think about sustainability and how we plant, grow, harvest, and distribute foods. I think of, I think of how we are becoming very overpopulated and we're not making sense in a lot of ways. And I worry about how that impacts food production and the nutrition and survival rates of people all around the world. So, food. I often fantasize about having my own restaurant of sorts to dazzle people with delicious food that they've never had that is, locally grown, sustainable product and things like that. But yeah, that's what I think about a lot. I think about a lot of things.
That's where marketers grow to
that's where this marketer goes, I think.
Well, it does make sense. Like if
it brings people together.
Food's a huge part of our lives, and there's not a lot of, in outside major metropolitan areas, there is no food. Like our family travels quite a bit on the road, and you can't stop anywhere and eat anything. We walk out the door of many places and go, look back, because this is the last time you ever see this place.
Yeah, you have to pack a lunch.
Yeah, you really do.
And you can stop. I'm certainly not being bougie about food, but all the things that I love in life gather around the table too. Mm-hmm. Even business meetings around food and talking. You can relax into it, and it really enjoying food and conversation is like two of my favorite things on the planet. So I do a lot of thinking about talking and a lot of thinking about eating. And a lot of learning at the same table. So, that's where my head's at.
That's awesome. So, sort of a closing question, but like, what advice would you give to business leaders today? What do they need to be looking at in 2024 and beyond, just to kind of gear themselves for?
That's a lofty question that I'm not sure I have the answer for, but as it pertains to marketing and business development is, there's a lot of churn out there. And I think it all starts through the interview process when you get to know someone and you go through onboarding. I think that business leaders would be wise to invest in their talent and, again, educate and continually develop and, have teams of people that are responsible for understanding where strengths and weaknesses are. We did this. I don't know if I should say, can I say the company name of a product we used?
Yeah.
At a company I worked at in the past, we used a testing service called Culture Index. And it was really, really cool because before you start, they basically get a blueprint of who you are personality-wise, who you are talent-wise, where your strengths, your weaknesses are. And then the organization is also tested, and it's usually anywhere from 3 or 6 months. And the goal is to see what stressors are pulling or pushing on the sort of native instincts and abilities your talent has. So for instance, if I was working on a lot of very technical information that revolved around fire protection for, an airplane hangar, then if I didn't have access to the person I needed to get this information, then I was doing a lot of research on my own, which is also time away off the clock at my house doing this, because you want to do good at your job. You want to provide a good service and be a good employee. So it kind of monitors how you're stretching past expected comfort zones and what the organization itself is doing to not alleviate those pressure zones. So it was a very, very cool. And, the company paid close attention to it. Really, I think the employees appreciated it. And it helps, I think, take a gauge of where your talent is and, what you can do to help triage things before there's burnout or, just frustration, or, maybe push employees a little bit further into areas you think that they might do really well in. So retention, I think, those sort of things, providing, education, development, and training for your employees is just absolutely paramount.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. We recently did a basically an evaluation, and I think it really helped open our minds. It wasn't as in depth as what that is, and we want to continue into it mainly because it just gives you the awareness of what you're doing.
It's so
to operate a business and to operate it in this market and to put out anything new. I mean, because new is what drives the economy, but new isn't well received if people aren't open to that.
Well, it's like AI. Everyone wants the shiny new object, but no one knows how to deal with it. It's too hot to handle, too cold to hold.
Right.
So I think, refining, like, with you doing podcasts, business leaders have an opportunity to be their authentic selves, whether they're, nervous about stepping up to the mic or whatnot, but the rate at which we consume content and data, our attention spans are almost like tsetse flies,
right?
But having something that is almost evergreen that lasts long is a testimony to, where your head at as a business leader. Being able to engage in a podcast gives you a chance to actually maybe be a little bit on the spot, get asked questions. Of course, you're usually writing on a script to a certain degree, but really getting a chance to understand and know this person that is responsible for, the livelihood of all their employees,
right?
Why their product is different, what that sort of, value add that they bring to the table is. And that's why as a marketer, I'm a huge fan of podcasts, because you're witnessing it in real time. And, of course, you can do edits and you can polish, but you really can't hide from the truth. And that's what happens when you're on a podcast.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Lauren Allen. It's really been good sitting down with you.
Thank you,
Exciting.
Jimmy. Me too.
Good to talk with you.
You too.